Can you teach writing, or is a writer born? And are you a constant, compulsive revise, or do you just get it out there, get it down first draft, and keep reworking it and polishing it? Or for you, is it just like the old Kerouac thing of first thought, best thought?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can teach. You can teach a craft to write, and you can teach people about, or people you can't so much teach, but people can learn about from different sources about how to structure a novel, how to kind of develop characters and develop storylines, plot lines, etc. Write description and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, that's all learnable or teachable or whatever. But I think what you can't teach is the kind of the desire and drive to do it. I think people either have that or they haven't. And what I kind of found that a lot of people that kind of took creative writing courses, the ones that I kind of taught on in Britain and in America, were they wanted to be writers because they had some kind of idea about that a writer's life was supposedly a kind of glamorous sort of life. So they wanted to be writers, but they didn't necessarily want to write or want to put in a lot of put in the effort. And so I think that I think it benefited. I think these kind of courses benefit somebody who's kind of maybe a little bit older, kind of maybe kind of late 20s, early 30s onwards, than young kids doing it as a first degree. So because by the time you get to your late 20s, you've got a lot of things have happened to you, and you've got a lot of stories to tell. Whereas, but you might not be kind of technically. So if you've not come from a literary background or not done a lot of writing, you might not be technically good. So I think you can learn a lot in that way. But a lot of young kids who are very good technically haven't really had the kind of experience, or don't really have the stories to tell. So I think it benefits kind of maybe older people.
Did you always want to be a writer? I was talking to Philip Kerr the other day, and he said that from the age of 8, and the moment he could first read a book, he knew that was his career path. That's what he wanted to do, and everything for the rest of his life is focused towards that. Did you always was Trainspotting lying dormant in you? You knew one day it was going to get out.
I mean, I always liked kind of reading, and I was always quite drawn to books, but I didn't grow up in a kind of bookish culture. I mean, there were no there was no kind of wood panel study with all these lovely books kind of around to immerse yourself in, and so it was like very much kind of music and television were the kind of main sort of cultural influences in my life growing up. So I kind of got I kind of always thought that I wanted to do music, but it was only through trial and error and getting more into fiction and I kind of realised that that's what I wanted to do. I think if you don't come from a bookish culture, you kind of maybe misinterpret your kind of creative drive to write for a creative drive to do something else, like kind of music or film or whatever.
You've also done a bit of boxing in your time and a bit of marathon running. And did the physical and the mental discipline that's needed to train as a boxer and to complete a marathon, did that influence your writing in any way?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, I think the thing about doing any kind of thing that involves kind of sort of like fitness and discipline and all that is kind of it's an inherently good thing for you. But I think yeah, I mean it's I think the more important thing as well is that I think if you're sitting at a screen all day, and you're not doing any kind of exercise, you'll just tend to sort of blow out. So I think it saves you the kind of, if you're doing some exercise, it saves you the anxiety about worrying about your weight. Basically, that's the kind of.
One more from me before we throw it open to the floor. You revisited characters of Ray Lennox. First wrote about him in Filth, and then again in Crime, and the guys from Trainspotting. They came back in Porno many years after. What made you revisit these characters?
Sometimes the gate crash in. I mean, I wanted, and there's no real kind of. there's no real reason for it. I mean, when I wrote Porno, which is a follow-up to Trainspotting, I didn't intend to have Sick Boy as the main character. I just kind of realised that when I'd written this character, it basically was him. He just gate crashed into it, so I had to change his name and make him Sick Boy, which kind of messed up the book for me in a bit because I didn't intend to write a sequel at the time, and it became that because of because I told his story, I had to tell the story of the other characters in Trainspotting. And Lennox was just like, I mean, I wanted to write a thing about somebody who was a cop who was involved in sex cases, who was kind of particularly child sex cases, but I wanted to have somebody who was who had a background where he'd maybe been in an abusive situation himself, and Lennox was just a small character in another book I wrote, Filth, but he seemed to be a character of secrets. He seemed to be quite kind of introspective and quiet and kept his own counsel and all that, so he just seemed to be the perfect guy who would step forward for that role. I think if you have characters that can do something, and they've still got some mileage in them, they've still got some legs in them, there's no point in inventing another character that's just the same. I mean, I always get frustrated in fiction when I read a writer that I really like, and then suddenly you realise that the character's just the same character, and he's maybe given him a different name or put him in a different town, and the girlfriend might be a kind of blonde instead of a brunette, but they're basically the same character. There's no real difference in the way they express themselves or act or their motivation. So I kind of, rather than just call somebody a different name, I do like to create a kind of bona fide, different character. I mean, characterisation is really important to me in books.
Questions from the floor?
Yeah, just speaking of characters, I'm fascinated by Renton. There's so many angles to his character. Can you kind of elaborate on him as a character and what he means to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question for me, because I'm doing the prequel to Trainspotting now, and I'm doing this writing about when they started to become, they went from being just kind of young guys about town having fun into becoming like hardcore drug addicts. And the transition, I think, is very kind of important. And I think the question is, for me, writing that book, is what actually made Renton kind of betray his friends and take the money. So I'm kind of looking at his background, and there's a lot of things that are kind of that I'm kind of finding out about the character that are quite interesting, that are coming out, and a lot of the kind of family dynamics within the Renton family about his mother, father and two brothers that I hadn't really, or only superficially kind of explored in Trainspotting, or kind of go into a lot more detail in them in this book. So I think, yeah, he's quite an interesting character. I think he's basically the guy who kind of who wanted to do the right thing, and who kind of surprisingly who hated the whole Thatcherite kind of thing, but surprisingly thrived under it, and felt kind of a bit guilty about that. I think that's a lot of there's a lot of people like that in Britain that I knew that kind of were kind of tooth and nail against that whole sort of that whole change in British society in the 80s, but actually kind of found themselves, to their embarrassment, and I'm probably one of them, kind of doing reasonably well out of it.
I'm interested to know how you've been able to avoid or overcome the PC mentality. That piece that you wrote before was hilarious and fucking brilliant, but if I sent that as a short story to any Australian literary journal, it would be rejected. Now, for example, I'm a gay person. I recently wrote, or a couple of years ago, wrote a novel, or a short story, I beg your pardon, in which there was a homophobic character. They were deliberately homophobic, and that was the whole point of the character. It was rejected on the basis that the character was homophobic. So I'd just be interested on your take on that, and how you've been able to carve a niche where you seem to have been able to avoid.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very kind of it's strange the times we live in. I mean, I honestly think now that if I'd submitted Trainspotting today to any publisher in London, it would be rejected. I've no doubts about that at all. I think we just I think basically what what kind of literature is like any other form of it's like any other form of art and culture. It takes place within an entertainment industry, and like kind of music, film, etc. And mostly, most times it's all going to be about entertainment. So it is all going to be about a kind of sense of affirmation, a sense of kind of giving people what they want isn't the same as kind of giving them what you think they need, and that's the arrogance of the writer. I think you've got to give people what they need rather than what they think they want. And I think the entertainment industry gives people what they want. And people don't really think about what they want, because it's basically, we're coming from a hard day's work. We just want to put our feet up. We don't want to kind of have our lives challenged and ripped apart and taken upside down. And fair enough. Why should we? But I think that every kind of era, you get something like kind of punk rock or acid house and all that, or something comes along and there's a sensibility that shakes things up, and people they get kind of bored with the same old bland crap, and they get open to new things. But these little kind of epochs, these little kind of windows, I think, in our cultural landscape are very, very rare. So I think basically it's like kind of timing is everything, really. And it's not something you can plan on doing. But I think basically that publishing, like any other industry, is quite is conservative and reactionary, and kind of it's not really there to sort of kind of to push the envelope out a wee bit, So I just think it's when you actually publish, or when you actually kind of present things for publication, is really, really important.
Last year I was lucky enough to be travelling overseas, and as you do, you look for books to read on your journey. It happened to be in Italy, so most big bookshops have got English language sections. So went into one looking for something to read, and I found one of your books, except I opened it up and it was written in Italian. So really my question is, how the hell do you translate Irvine Welsh into Italian and maintain the atmospherics and the sense of place of the original?
Well, I mean, I've not got a great facility with languages, so basically I don't know. I'm the kind of I have to rely on other people. Kind of usually the overseas publishers or the translators telling me that this is they've done a good job, and usually it's the publisher's only going to tell you they've done a bad job of translating their book, and nor are the translators. I remember one time I was in St. Petersburg in Russia, and I've got there's two guys in Russia. I think one guy's translated 4 of my books, and the other guy's translated 5 of my books. The publishers keep on issuing them. They'll give one guy one book for a bit, and then they'll give another guy a book. And so I was out for a drink with them both, and we're having a few drinks, and the two guys, they came out, and they're the best of friends and all that. And one guy's going, "My best friend, he's a fantastic guy, a great translator." And then as soon as one guy goes to the toilet, "He's made a mess of your books. The next one, it must be me," And I go, "Fair." And then the other guy would go to the toilet, and the other guy come back here. "Do not trust him. A great man, but he is not a good translator. The book he did of yours, the last one, terrible. Me for the next book." So then he'd come back, "My friend, he is so good." It was like being in a Dostoevsky novel. I felt like I was one of the brothers Karamazov there, yeah, so basically I don't know. I have to kind of I've heard that certain translations kind of are better than other translations and all that, and I've heard that some, you get journalists saying this one is really good, it really works, but there's so many issues to consider. Do you try and basically do you make it a kind of do you make it Scottish, or do you Italianize it culturally in subtle ways, in a way that people kind of get? So it's just such a minefield, and kind of good luck to anybody who takes on translating.
My question is just in regards to your settings with your books, because a lot of them are in like Leith and Edinburgh. Do you kind of go back to those places and try to keep up with what's going on, what's changing, what's staying the same, and then try to pump that into your books and into your stories? Yeah,
whenever I go back, it's very difficult to avoid it, because everybody's in your face telling you, you got to put this in your book, tell you this happened. It's like, so So it's very hard, kind of, you know. The difficult thing is actually get them to shut up about it and go for a drink, you know, and just kind of, just shut up about my books and get up to the fucking bar. You know? So yeah, I mean, so it's like, but you get bombarded with kind of stories and ideas, and it's like kind of, and the latest kind of slang term, you're always getting overused in your face all the time because they know that you don't know it because I'm living in America, so they know that I don't know the latest term for kind of, I don't know, like stabbing somebody or getting AIDS or whatever, you know. So it's like I can actually do without knowing really, but I get told it anyway. So.
How are you going? The first book I read of yours was Marabou Stalk Nightmare, and I couldn't read for a couple of months afterwards because I was so disturbed. And it seemed to sort of charge in from left field. I'm just wondering where you see your work fitting in with a literary tradition of any kind, and what sort of authors are you reading at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I think it is kind of squarely in that Scottish kind of sort of black kind of literary tradition in terms of, people like James Hogg and Grassic Gibbon and Robert Louis Stevenson. You know, the whole issue of duality as well, I think, is quite strong in Marabou Stalk Nightmares and maybe another couple of books that I've done, and that's very much a big theme in Scottish literature. But I mean, my personal thing is, it's like I've always been fascinated, you know, as an individual. I've always been fascinated by how people that are kind of born into advantageous circumstances can make the wrong decision and, you know, compound that misery that they're in by making the wrong decisions. So, I mean, I've done this myself, and I've watched it in other people. This kind of this self-destruct kind of mechanism thing, that everything's going along quite well, or at least as a window of opportunity to make life slightly better. But if kind of A leads to milk and honey and B leads to sort of death, darkness and despair, you know, it's just let's just go for B, because it's like just that way when there's a kind of a cultural expectation of failure, you know, it becomes a kind of norm, and it becomes something that the fear of success, the fear of actually doing well and distancing yourself from your peers often becomes this overwhelmingly kind of scary thing, and that's something that I like to investigate in my books. But in terms of other writers, I mean, I kind of read anything really. I mean, there's a lot of writers some of the writers that I admire aren't always the ones that I like, and some of the ones that have kind of influenced me have been writers I've actually really disliked. And I mean, I go back to the kind of standard stuff that I kind of always go back to. I mean, are kind of like people like a lot of like 19th century novelists like Dickens. I'll go back to, and I'll go back to people like kind of Evelyn Waugh and George Orwell, and a lot of the Scottish writers that I've kind of mentioned to you. And I like the kind of I like American fiction as well. I like the thing about Britain is that if you read British fiction all the time, you're never really free from the obsessions of the class system, and kind of, you know, and you shouldn't really be free because it's such an important cultural part of understanding the society. And I'm not free from it myself when I write, but it's great to pick up a novel and just kind of be right outside that, you know, and you get that in American US fiction. Not so knowledgeable about Australian fiction, basically because it's over there. You don't really see much outside Peter Carey, basically, in terms of distribution, which I think is a shame. So obviously I'll come back with a big load of Australian books and read them like I did the last time I was over here.
G'day, Mr. Walsh. Yeah, mate, when I first read Trainspotting, it was about the hardest read I'd ever read, apart from Anthony Burgess in A Clockwork Orange. Like, man, you really, knocked the English language 4 ways from Sunday, eh? But what my question is to you, what I liked about Trainspotting is, like, growing up where I did, I noticed a real paradox with that, because you set the entire environment in which those sort of addictions and those sort of situations begin. So my question to you today is, like, what did you think of the movie, man? Because it went against that in my eyes. Well,
I think I really enjoyed the film. I think it's a great film, and I think the choices they made were very good ones in terms of the film they wanted to make, you know. And I think that, you know, when I was selling the rights to it, a lot of really good filmmakers had approached me, and they wanted to do a kind of that 1970s style kitchen sink drama approach to it, which was kind of very, very kind of overtly kind of political, and I mean, it presupposed that kind of 70s kind of socialistic thing that you can kind of show, you can show poverty or despair or abuse and all that, and then shame the powers that be into you know, diverting resources into it, and that was the kind of assumption and all that stuff. Whereas the one thing I liked about Danny Boyle and Andrew MacDonald and John Hodge is that they knew that was all kind of bullshit now. I mean, there's no way that people like Thatcher and the Tories in the 80s were going to be shamed into anything, you know, into giving the working classes in Britain anything at all, you know. In fact, it was probably seen as a good thing. It kept people quiet if they were all skagged up instead of sort of tearing up Brixton and Toxteth and Dundee and all that, you know. So, yeah, so I think the approach was a very good one, and it was very much something from inside the culture, and I think a lot of joy and exuberance in it as well, because it did, you know, it showed the side of it that people get into drugs because they're basically good fun, and you know, and then they fuck you up. You can't just say this like show drugs fucking you up, because it only tells part of the story. You've got to, you know, if they just fucked you up, nobody would do them. But the problem is that they're good fun first before they fuck you up. So they showed that.
Sorry, but I've just had the nod, and we are out of time. So if you could just please thank Irvine for being here this morning.